permanent video recording begins. And so here we go. Hello, good morning, and good afternoon to everyone. I think even a good evening is due to some, because I believe we have some people in London, England. So hello to you. Thanks for being here in the late evening. And for those of you that are listening in, please mute when you are not when you're not speaking. Thank you. And very glad to see all of you here. My name is Larry LaMotte. I am your host today. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available online. All of our previous webinars are on YouTube now and will continue to be. So again, if those of you who are listening but not speaking, please mute. Thank you. All righty. So at ReCapturit, my company, we are passionate stewards of salvage, extending the life of building materials and buildings with three things. We've got the solution to construction waste, the place to shop for and sell treasures of recaptured materials at ReCapturit.com, and help for cities to craft clear and effective reuse incentives and policies, which is the broad scope of today's discussion. And it's what we call the Deconstruction Policy Accelerator, or the DPA for short. Rhymes with EPA. So a couple of quick questions, just sort of just to keep things going. What is the largest waste producing set of practices in the world? Construction and demolition. And what is the single best solution for eliminating that? Deconstruction. Deconstruction and reuse of buildings and recaptured building materials rather than all demolition and disposal. Well, we have entered into the world of planning and policy with cities and counties across the U.S. Each of our events, like this webinar, builds onto the previous ones. Our workshops get into much more detail on how to. The webinars, like I said, are all on YouTube. This is our sixth in an ongoing series of webinars and workshops provided to educate, inform, and even inspire officials and sustainability champions everywhere to understand the need to move toward deconstruction from the total demolition and disposal of buildings. These are not paper towels, people, we're throwing away. We are throwing away whole buildings every day, all day, and there is an urgency to move things forward. But I've seen a lot of the same old sluggishness, and you have too, and only a few spots of courageous initiative.
Larry,
Melissa,
can you mute deconstruction, Dave?
let me see if I can. Participants.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Okay, so anyway, we do need to accelerate things. There's an urgency out there for this. And in our prior webinars, we talked about tax benefits and reduction of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Today's webinar will be a series of questions to get at the vast experience and knowledge of Dave Bennink and Michael Olen, and how to tap into some unrealized values in your cities. So I'm managing the slides today too, so let's head in there. Topic for today: mining for resources within your city limits. So we'll get to that, more of that in just a moment. That's me with the goofy grin, founder and CEO of ReCapturit and the creator of the DPA, the Deconstruction Policy Accelerator. My background, just so you know, was in architecture. I went into construction, remodeling. I built my own house. I tore things down. I put them back together. I've done everything from plumbing and concrete and electrical and every phase of construction there is. So I'm also a big scrounger of materials, and I've been a fierce fighter of waste, and I've incorporated materials into every project I've ever done, just about, from other projects. And a friend of mine here where I live calls my basement the Home Depot, because we can pretty much go in there and find just about anything we need to do whatever we need around the house. But this is really not about me. This is about our expert panelists and all they know, and they're going to share with you today. Dave Bennink and Michael Olen, who will share their ideas with you, and at the end we'll answer questions. So you can put questions into the chat here. So look for that little chat bubble wherever it is. Click on that and put questions that you have as they come up into the chat. I'm going to drop Michael's and Dave's and my LinkedIn into the chat here, as well as our ReCapturit addresses. Shameless plug. me tell you a little bit about these guys. Michael is currently the founder at Sauvetage. I hope I said that right. His own new construction management firm. He formerly worked as condemnation inspector and deconstruction project manager for the very picturesque city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Michael is also a visiting instructor at Milwaukee's School of Engineering. Dave Bennink, our other panelist today, is founder of the Reuse Innovation Center, the Building Deconstruction Institute, and Reuse Consulting. He travels all over the world, training, deconstructing, and helping people set up new reuse businesses. And Dave hails from the beautiful city of Bellingham, Washington. We're excited to have these two gentlemen with us today, share their knowledge and to instill hope for our future. So let's get started and let's mine the knowledge of these very knowledgeable experts. Let's go there. That's our guys. These dystopic views of old buildings kind of bring the subject to bear here. Apartment buildings, warehouses, commercial buildings, they're in all cities, you know, the old ones, the decrepit ones. Well, buildings deteriorate. Sometimes they are upgraded. You know, they're retrofitted, they're remodeled, they're renovated. Sometimes they are demolished and replaced. And sometimes they are simply left to deteriorate. Well, that invites all sorts of unpleasant things, vermin, crime, deteriorating values, and more, and it's not a good cycle. Same thing happens to houses. What do we do with these? Well, Michael Olen has had plenty of experience in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, being one who determined the fate of abandoned houses and deteriorating buildings. And Dave Bennink went in and took down piece by piece many such houses and commercial buildings. So what's in them? That's the question for us today. That's what urban mining is all about, you know. Both of our panelists have considerably different experiences and roles in deconstructing derelict buildings. Some they've experienced have been good, some have been bad. One expert recently told me that a building next to the building she works in was slated for demolition. She works in a major city in the US. And someone got wind of that and proposed that they could deconstruct that building instead. And that company which deconstructed it realized over $1 million of resale value. Well, that's gold. Now, the specifics of all that, you know, it was a big building to begin with, so that's part of it. But I don't know all the specifics of that, but I thought that was a fascinating statistic. And there are others that don't balance out so well financially, too. In fact, they go the other way. So we'll hear about those today, too. So what do you do with it? That's a big question, too. People want to get, they say, okay, well, we take it down, we take it apart, and we, you know, what do we do with it? Well, these images I've had created just to show that used materials can go into brand spanking new buildings and look gorgeous and extend the life of the materials. Dave Bennink has some ideas he's been working on. And it takes a little creativity to break the pattern of always using new. What if used blended beautifully with new? So now let's take a look at the what is to discover what can be. So now we're all can see one another. I'm going to make you a little bigger so I can see you. Hey, all kinds of people have joined. Welcome. All righty, Dave Bennink, you're going to have the floor here. Question number 1. Hello again. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So congrats on starting up your, I think this is the 6th Reuse Innovation Center. That's awesome. Question. You've deconstructed hundreds and hundreds of buildings in your 3 decades of deconstruction, and you've taught hundreds and maybe thousands of people how to deconstruct buildings in residential and commercial. While some of those demolition projects were to clear a property for the next building to be built on the same land, somebody please mute. And sometimes you simply went in after the values of the materials and not for the imminent use of the site. That, in essence, going into proactively extract the materials from a site is basically the definition of urban mining, extracting useful and valuable materials from a derelict, abandoned, or condemned building by deconstructing it. So would you please tell us, Dave, about what prompts such efforts and what are some of the outcomes you've experienced.
Okay, can you hear me?
Clear as a bell.
Okay, good. I was worried about the background noise or whatever. We've been doing this a long time, and it was in the beginning, it was all about landfill diversion, that, you know, about helping the environment as far as like, why do we do it? But we learned quickly that we were doing it for people and the environment. We could help people by providing them materials for historic renovation projects. We could help people by selling affordable materials, not just having expensive reclaimed wood that's beautiful and expensive. You know, we benefited the community in that way. We created jobs in neighborhoods where there were not a lot of jobs. And it turns out that a lot of the neighborhoods that have blighted, vacant, and abandoned buildings also don't have a lot of jobs. So the idea became to create jobs in neighborhoods where these blighted buildings are, to actually hire people from the neighborhood where the properties existed. So, but yeah, we would go in and, I think we've tackled hundreds of buildings in like the Rust Belt cities, for example, you know, where the population had moved out. There used to be 600,000 people in Buffalo, then there was only 285 or 265 or whatever. And it's amazing, like, how you could say half the city's empty. It's just vacant, you know. So we were trying to connect that resource, meaning an existing building, with people who were looking for opportunities, you know, people who needed work, and then finishing off by benefiting the community by making those materials affordable to people that needed to maintain a home. So
Right. Nice.
Mhm.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you. Michael, you're up. And thank you for being here.
I am here. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're fine. Don't worry. Yep.
Good.
So you left the hallowed halls of city government for your own enterprise. Congratulations. I hope that goes splendidly.
I'm still actually with the city of Milwaukee.
Oh, okay.
I did start when I had to do it. Everybody who knows, who lives there, works in a bureaucracy or near one in a large business, it can be constricted.
Okay.
Thought-wise, constricting. So I needed an outlet. I needed an outlet where I could do a lot of research regarding deconstruction and the materials, a place where I can send it to, in a lot of ways, work with developers. I think I found the best way to move deconstruction in my little sphere, or my little ecosystem, is to work with the developers, work on a different level than what we're working at with the city. So it's kind of two different legs on the triangle that are going to work together.
Okay. Okay. Let me shoot you the question here I've got for you. And since you did spend 13 years and now you are continuing at the city of Milwaukee, being building inspector, fire inspector, to condemnation and deconstruction project manager, the teacher at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, it's safe to say you have an informed perspective on the value of deconstruction. While in some ways, deconstructing a building for the value of its materials is indeed a valuable exercise, as I pointed out an example, and Dave did too. Sometimes it's not. Would you speak to some caveats, some simple cautionary tales to be aware of as other cities plan to introduce deconstruction in the mix of their areas? And please give some context and some specifics about the financial aspects, if you would, coming from Milwaukee, which is not one of our more affluent cities. Thanks.
That's a big question. One of the first things I would say for a city that wants to get involved in deconstruction and is doing it for the material, are you doing it for the workers that Dave mentioned? Are you doing it for the community? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it to resell the material in the schwanky suburb 20 miles away from the community you're pulling the material in? What's your goal? What's your agenda? if you do it for just one goal, you're going to fail. If you do it just to get the material, you're likely going to fail. And this is specifically from my experience. So I'm speaking as not a city employee sometimes, but a little bit of both. You have to look at it holistically. You have to involve the community you're in constantly. That has to be at the heart of what you do. The material itself, as you can see, this is a live building. This is a building in the city of Milwaukee. It's owned by the taxpayers. It's on our condemnation list. It's a publicly owned building. It's next week, 2 weeks from now, it's going to be used for fire training. Not to be burned, but it's going to be used. So in that sense, we're using the product already. We're already reusing this blighted building. This blighted building and any others across the city, whether you're in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Baltimore, it's going to cost your city at least $15,000 a year just to maintain it in this condition. So I look at the material as a bonus. I love the material. I love the building materials and how it ties into engineering and architecture. We can go on. That's a completely different topic. If we're just talking about the blight, physically, this building will cost your community $15,000 more, actually, in the end. We just had a vacant building start on fire. It happens. People like to go into vacant buildings and start them on fire. Each fire that happens is likely going to cost 30 grand for that specific building. This building brings down the neighborhood property values within 500 feet of this building. And our cities are pretty similar. 500-foot radius of buildings is at least 100 right now. But as Dave mentioned, when we start removing the blight in this neighborhood, it doesn't come back. So when I say holistically work together, when I'm deconstructing a blighted building, there should be a plan in place to replace that building, or else I'm just causing a tear in the fabric of the neighborhood. That social fabric just slowly gets weaker and weaker and weaker as more vacant lots I have around this building. I might pull this up as we speak. Ask Dave a question and I'll pull you up the Google map of where I am.
Okay.
You can feel for that.
All right, Dave.
The bulk of it. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Dave, you're back. So cities and counties vary hugely across the country, but you've worked in most states and other countries too, and on many projects in some states. You've seen the gamut: dense, sprawling, richer, poorer, older building stock, newer. What are some of the most valuable things you've learned about what can be done with large amounts of materials that can be incorporated into virtually any city's plan? And is it advantageous to proactively go after more? Are there efficiencies that you've seen in this? Because you've learned a lot. And are there efficiencies that can be replicated?
Well, let's see. One of the things is that we are really focused on going after every building type and every condition of building. So like, that's why we have spent time in vacant and abandoned buildings instead of just doing the highest end projects we can find on the lake, you know, the vacation home on the lake. We don't just do that kind of stuff. We don't just go after old warehouses full of beautiful old wood. So we are there to go after all types of material, not just so we can have that material, but so that we can show our clients that this type of work can be done. You know, it's easy to make like a warehouse work because there's so much value in the material. It's hard to make, you know, a building that has, you know, doesn't have a lot of valuable material in it. You know, it's harder to make that economically viable, that process. So we've been, it's actually forced us to be better at deconstruction and faster and more efficient because we aren't willing to give up on entire building types like mobile homes, for example. You know, that's something that's really difficult a lot of times to make that a viable enterprise, because there isn't a lot of value to start with. So,
Right.
but yeah, we are. But here's something we learned. In the beginning, we were like, we can save 99% of this from the landfill, And then we realized that when we did that, and it took all month or something, that while we were so focused on one project, 99 other buildings went straight to the garbage dump. And so we realized that, we need to, the math is simple, like it's almost like a flowing river. You can't stop it. You just try to divert as much of it as you can. You're out of the landfill, right? And so we would take the approach, especially on vacant abandoned buildings, and say this: there are a lot of them, there are a lot of projects. It isn't all about vacant abandoned buildings. There's a lot of buildings out there that are coming down, and a lot of materials going to the dump.
Yep.
And it's in our best interest to go after the most materials and valuable materials, for sure. We don't want to see valuable materials go to the dump. But along the way, we're going to deal with a lot of ordinary materials as well. And we realized that instead of going after like 99% of every building, if we tried for 89%, diversion or something like that we could go faster and we could do more buildings. And we compared ourselves with another operation. Remember, we've helped over 200 reuse operations. So we have a lot of people that we talk with, and they were doing about one project a month. We were doing about 4 projects a month, and they saved a lot of material from their one building. We, like 99% or 96%. And we were saving less than that, but we were doing 4 projects a month. So when you looked at who saved more from the landfill, we were saving about 3 times more material from the landfill with the same amount of people. And so so the way that you take it down is important. And I think our role is to show people, like, to try everything, to take the hard road, to take on challenging projects, to try and save every type of material, and so that we can have affordable materials for sale, and and have high-end materials for sale that help fund the operation. So I think that we never set a limit on what type of material we should save or how much, but I think we are trying to find a path where we can actually be competitive and get into the largest number of projects, so that we would be essentially competitive enough to go out and get any project we wanted. Because it isn't all about subsidies or somebody being forced to do deconstruction. In the real world, you're competing with machines, and we're competing and winning. And not every time, but I think we've learned a lot along the way, and that's the kind of thing we pass on to our clients. You're muted, I think.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I think that was a beautiful answer, and I think you encapsulated all of it in one statement just a minute ago. And you said that you go after everything, the wide variety, the affordable, to make that available to others that need it, as well as the high end to fund the projects. And I think that can be expanded out into the whole industry. Go for the affordable to help the affordability, and go for the high end to fund the process, so to speak. So nice job, Michael. Where are you? Okay, I lost you. Are you there, Michael? Did he fall off? He might have fallen off. Okay, Dave, you're up again. These things happen. Okay, so obviously deconstruction fits into the whole circle of circularity, bringing a whole new second life to what would have been waste on its way to the dump. You have been innovative in how you have disassembled buildings specifically wood frame buildings, by not disassembling just the individual pieces, studs, beams, pipes, so forth, but by cutting out whole panels of walls and floors with sheathing the wood surface on the outside still attached to studs and to joists. And you've looked into end users of these panels of floors and walls. So do you envision that you will have a sizable buyer audience for such used panels, and are you actively seeking old houses to deconstruct for that, or is that simply a small niche buyer audience that you've been approaching?
Yeah, well, it's something we've been doing for 20 years, so it's not new to us. But here's what happened, guys. One day I took apart a wall, I deconstructed a wall, and we knocked it over, we pried it apart, we pulled all the nails, we cut off the bad ends, we recycled all the short pieces and cracked pieces and things like that. And then we brought the materials back, and someone bought a lot of the materials. And I said, "What are you going to build with that?" And they said, "I'm going to build a wall." and I was like, "Wait a minute, I just took apart the wall." So I realized, why don't I just sell you the wall? It saved me a lot of trouble. It saved you a lot of trouble. And so we realized that it made a lot of sense. If you have an intact wall and somebody put a lot of effort into building that wall, there's a lot of embodied energy wrapped up in that wall. And there are materials like nails that are, when you pull them out, they're bent, they get recycled. Well, we reuse them. And when you have Tyvek, we reuse that. Hardy plank siding is not really reusable or recyclable, but we reuse it in place on the wall. We never take it off. So we expanded that to floor panels or floor assemblies. So these assemblies are things like, we don't sell you a kit to build a staircase. We sell you the staircase. We sell you the trusses. We sell you the walls. We sell you sections of floor. And so, we're approaching 200 structures that we've rebuilt now. So when you have been doing this as long as I have, and you want to kind of take control of the process, you're tired of waiting for other people to adopt your ideas, or to get on board with it. So realize that, hey, we can take it, Larry, we can take it from deconstruction. We're taking the building down, diverting it from the landfill. Then we sell it, in this case, in form of assemblies, right? But then we are selling kits that people buy. I want an 8x12 shed. Well, here's an 8x12 shed kit. The floor and walls and door and window and stuff like that comes with it. And then we are now looking to help them rebuild it ourselves, but we're actually designing these kits to be disassembled. So if you've ever heard of the term design for disassembly, our kits will be designed so that the way they are built is easier to deconstruct when its lifespan is over. So yes, this is a great improvement over what we had done in the past. And, it's what we call reuse 2.0. Everything that we're doing is so much different than what we did 30 years ago when we first started. It deserves its own term, and so we're calling it reuse 2.0. And Eric knows all about that. But the thing is that's just one good example of something where, well, what did we just do? We made deconstruction easier, didn't we? Because now we don't have to work so hard to deconstruct the building. So that's one good thing. Another thing is, we're not recycling as much as we used to. We're reusing it instead, like those short pieces, or those pieces that would have broken when you took them off, or those nails that you would have bent, like they're all being reused. And items like spray foam insulation we're coming across, we can take out that wall with a spray foam insulation in the wall, or we can take a floor that's been glued down to the floor joists, and we can save all that material, even though somebody, essentially designed that building for demolition, right? And so, yeah, it's been an amazing thing, and it's catching on. It's all part of the Reuse Innovation Center efforts. But
good, fantastic. And you're also reusing the labor that went into the original construction. I think
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Yeah, we definitely are honoring the craftsmanship of the past by literally preserving it intact.
Right.
Because it's
Literally. Sorry.
yeah, literally. Oh, very good.
Yeah. It seems our friend Michael has had some internet problems or something. So it's you and me, Dave.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how the internet is in a vacant and abandoned building. Maybe he needs to pay the bill. But no.
So,
but yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, let's keep going. Here's the one we talked about earlier. Let me make sure I'm getting the right. Yeah. So you have a business model you are promoting, and you've told me quite a bit about, and you're assisting others with the implementation and the operation of this, called the Reuse Innovation Center. And as you bring more of these into existence, do you see these as a place, a venue for introducing urban mining as part of the mix on the supply side of this reuse ecosystem? Proactively going and looking for buildings to disassemble, to put those materials into the flow of things. And when you answer that, please give us a little short definition of your Reuse Innovation Center first, so we understand how that fits together.
Okay, well, so this whole Reuse 2.0 idea is that in the beginning, we did it like everyone else. I guess there wasn't that many people doing it 30 years ago, but we kind of did it in a natural flow, where you're like, well, I guess we are supposed to start a store, and then supposed to do this and that and the other thing, and I never stopped trying to improve on that. I never was satisfied. I never was content with being like second to demolition, right, as a mainstream form of building removal. And I knew that there was a way that we could become the mainstream. And one of the things that I looked at demolition and I looked at deconstruction, and I compared the two, and I said, you know what, one of the things demolition has on me is they can do it so much faster. So we started doing things like the walls and the floors so that we could get faster, right? And made us a little cheaper, so we're a little bit more competitive. And one of the things I realized about going faster was they could do more projects and have the economies of scale, right? The idea that they could do 10 projects, and I could only do 3, and boy, that was an advantage for them. So what I realized is, well, what if it wasn't just me? And so then we started like partnering with other reuse groups, and I realized that what if we had a Reuse Innovation Center where multiple reuse groups joined together in a collective effort, almost like a business cooperative, and where they are all working towards the same goal, and they're benefiting from economies of scale. Like, one thing is, we can rent a bigger warehouse because we have more people, but the cost per square foot in bigger warehouses is less than a small warehouse. So we're benefiting. And this one group says, I'm going to have to buy a forklift, and the other group says, I'm going to have to buy a forklift, but I'm only going to use it about 2 times a week. Well, we only have one forklift that we share, right? Like a tool library almost approach now. And so there's a benefit. Then we have the deconstruction company that says, I love to deconstruct buildings, but I don't have time to go find the work, and I don't know where to sell the material. Then you have somebody that makes reclaimed wood furniture, and they're like, I'm so busy making furniture, I can't take buildings apart. Where am I going to find the wood? So the Reuse Innovation Center is all of those things. And, it's benefiting. Those two companies now are connected And so the one isn't wondering where to get rid of this stuff. The one isn't wondering where to get this stuff. It's all tied together. They are
Nice.
helping each other. The Reuse Innovation Center, the retail portion, becomes like the face of the operation in the community. And so when people have a building they want taken down, they call the reuse center. When they need reclaimed wood tables, they go to the reuse center. So so there's lots of good things, but what does this have to do with like inner city kind of, you know, getting reuse into your community? Well, what it does is it lowers the bar, it lowers the startup cost, it lowers the risk, okay? Because you're not doing it on your own. You don't need to find all the funding. You don't need to do everything, you know, like you don't have to pay all the bills. You don't have to do the deconstruction and build the furniture, you know, all yourself. And
Right.
you have somebody there with you. So it is turning out to be a great micro business incubator or small business incubator because it's reducing the risk and cost of starting up. And it's you know, these companies are entering into an inviting environment where everyone is helping each other, and they have, it's almost like jump starting them into, you know, instead of them having to say, hey, look at me, I'm over here, even though I'm so, you know, new and I don't have a lot of money and I don't have a big voice. Collectively, people were shouting at the community and saying, you know, give reuse a try, or we're the responsible choice for building removal, or whatever the message we're passing on. So we are getting a lot of people, Larry, that in 3 Canadian provinces and probably 6 American states right now that are either have started them or are on the way to starting reuse innovation centers in this new approach.
Nice.
And, you know, remember, each one could be 10 different reuse businesses that would start up from that effort. So that's why we think that could be, as they get started, they could be, you know, doing a lot of volume and really benefiting the community in multiple ways in a relatively short amount of time.
And if I'm hearing right, as they establish connections within the community and the community starts to know that they're there, on the supply side, those who are supplying the materials from the job sites starts to be available for the demand side, those, whether that's furniture makers or whether that's, say, a green builder who is asking for whole building, you know, whole house building packages of lumber or something. And you can start to establish those supply chain channels as this thing grows and becomes more well known. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we're definitely finding that. I think that a lot of, you know, basically, if you can imagine, you know, we've helped over 200 reuse businesses, and through that, you learn a lot about what each of them experiences, like challenges that they all have in common. And so then I started formulating plans instead of just trying to address each one of them and say, we'll just try and figure it out. I started figuring out ways to solve all of those problems all at the same time.
Nice.
Right? The one says, I can't find enough deconstruction jobs. I don't know what to do with this stuff once I deconstruct it. Where do I find wood to build my furniture? How do I find enough wood as an or enough materials as an architect to meet the needs of my project, where I need 20 doors or I need 10,000 square feet of flooring or something like that? How do we keep the costs down? You know, how do we get the public involved? You know, like, how do we make a repair center, which is part of the reuse innovation centers? How do we make a repair center profitable? How do we train up a whole industry full of people? Like, how do we, you know, get enough people doing this, or right, you know, through workforce development? all of these problems are solved at the same time through these, because we become a magnet for funding for, especially like training dollars.
Yep.
You're getting trained on 7 different industries at the same time, because you can get training on deconstruction, furniture making, retail, logistics, warehousing, all these different things you can learn about at a reuse innovation center.
Right.
And so there's so many wonderful things happening, and that's why I think it's catching on so fast. So
That's good. That's fantastic. Okay. Thanks. I see Michael is back. He's on the road now. He's no longer in the 1908 house. So Michael,
Well, you
sorry, we
just have
lost
to
you.
remember that I need a generator inside the vacant house. There's no power inside the vacant house. I am so sorry.
Okay. Hey,
But that
it's all right.
aside, what Dave is talking about is so key. The reason we've had so many contractors fail at deconstruction is not that they don't know how to take a house down. That's the easy part. The training, being able to train the individuals, that calls for a pretty specific contractor who has a mentality and the patience to do a lot of that workforce development training. But a lot of our small contractors, they don't have the infrastructure in place to move the material. They don't have Dave's sustainable brain either. So they don't have that sustainable mindset to be that deconstruction contractor. They need a little support. So any city that's going to go through the same thing, they're going to hit hiccup after hiccup after hiccup with your contractors. If they started out as demolition contractors and then want to veer into deconstruction, or whether they're nonprofits that want to start taking on deconstruction, a lot of them see the dollar signs in the contract, whether if it's $1 million contract to take down 20 buildings, they see the dollar signs and they don't have a plan in place to move the material. So that's so critical to have that infrastructure in place. You almost, from the city's perspective, want to develop the infrastructure along with developing the contractors. So you need that holistic picture that Dave has of where you're going to move the material to kind of before you touch the building. So give yourself an opportunity for success. And the problem is everybody tries to jump in right away thinking they can do it. It's so easy, but it's a lot more complex as you start peeling back the layers of the onion. And know the regulations beforehand. Know every regulation that could possibly hit you and be a stumbling block for those small organizations that just want to get into it for the right reasons. They could get knocked down at the knees pretty quick if they start going into figuring out all the workforce regulations, the asbestos, everything you need to do. I can't preach that infrastructure enough. And that's one thing where Dave can really be the expertise he has there.
Indeed. And in the conversations I've been having with people around the nation now, I'm finding that one thing that is often overlooked is that demand side of things, and where's it going to go, and who's going to buy it, and who's going to put it into things. But Dave has already addressed that, and you are too. But you're right. It's a holistic system with a lot of little, different supply chains within it, process chains within it, that and then add in the complexity of existing laws, regulations, ordinances, and so forth. It's not easy, but it's definitely doable. And so, Michael, since you had a little break there, we filled in, but I'm going to still give you the last question, and maybe you can shine some light on a positive future with this one. And how do you see better value creation and opportunity with this extraction of used materials versus wasting them and tossing them in the dump as we currently do? And can city officials help plan for all this now?
Yes, city officials can lead on it, I would say. And a lot of them, a lot of city officials they're sustainable. They think there's going down that path, but they do need to be educated a little bit. And it's not, I don't mean that in a harsh way, but just educated on the possibilities.
Right.
If you look at the commercial demolition sector, they're recycling 76% of the material from the buildings. And us as a residential C&D demolition, we're not anywhere close to that. So we're talking about blight in particular here. A lot of my buildings, they're fire damaged buildings, or they've deteriorated for so long once they get down to our level. Is the material really worth something? I could pull maybe 5,000 board feet of lumber out of a building that's half fire damage. I could still get material out of it. But I need to think of that spot between deconstruction and demolition. I need to be the most sustainable demolition I can do. And I think that's a spot where I can sell to your cities that are interested in removing the blight and doing it in a sustainable manner.
Gotcha.
This is
Gotcha.
me talking from the research I've done on this, and I'm pretty darn close, and Dave could probably back me up, that I could get an 80% recycling rate from your average building. The building I was just in, I could at least get 85 to 90% recycling. I know recycling isn't the word we want to use, but there's a point where the blight, there's an equilibrium. For instance, we at the city, we can have maybe 100 buildings that are blighted. That's a good equilibrium, 100, 150. Any more than that, and it really becomes a traumatic draw on the neighborhood.
Right.
Where you need to get rid of that blight now because of the damage it's causing to the community. So, and that is sustainable in its own way. That quality of life in the neighborhood, that's something that we need to worry about sustainably just to keep that neighborhood strong. So I came up, I think I'm at the right spot coming up with that sustainable demolition and trying to prove that concept to the officials at the city. Where can we go to quickly take down the building so it's not causing any more harm and be sustainable at it? And just knowing where the material is going to is the first step. I don't think it's as much regulation. I think it's more of a change of mindset for our contractors, because most of them flow between commercial and residential demolition. So it's more of hey, let's do it this way. Let's get that 80% recycling rate first, get all the good material we can get out of a building, and we'll be in a much better space.
Yeah. I tell people it's all a big transition. It's not going to be an instant throw of the switch. It's not going to be the proverbial iron fist of law coming in and saying it must all 100% be done now. It's a transitional thing, and Portland had a really good has a really good example of that in the transition and the levers that they can adjust in their deconstruction policy to accelerate or decelerate the progress that's being made based on the reality of the situation. Were they able to train enough people to do deconstruction? Is the volume of materials overwhelming the warehouse space existing, or is it the other way around? So those that ability to flex and respond is a key ingredient. But they're staging it like San Antonio is over a series of years to be brought in, understanding that there's a lot of systemic change that has to be happening, and what you're saying with your perspective coming from where you are in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is a huge value, and it dovetails right in with what Dave's saying about having a system in place to accept, to help transport, to show what can be done with, and to help establish those supply chains of the materials coming out of that which comes out of blight. But there's another example in the country, and that's Palo Alto, California, which is one of the most wealthy cities in the nation, and they have a deconstruction policy, and they say that they have to divert 100% of the waste that comes out of construction and demolition. And that when a house is deconstructed there in Palo Alto, they have no problem selling that property there for a higher price than, you know, the cost of deconstruction there is kind of a moot point for the value of the property there. It's a kind of a rounding error, maybe not that much, but it's almost insignificant, I've heard, compared to the price of the property and the price of the house that's going to be on the property. So it gives there's a very different end of the spectrum kind of a perspective there, from Milwaukee and a lot of blight to Palo Alto, to just like, yeah, we want to get rid of that because we're going to put on this swanky new place. But there's everything in between too. So you guys are doing a great job in everything that you're doing. I'm looking to see if we have any questions in the Q&A now. So I'm actually going to if I can find where that went again, excuse me just a moment. We'll look for the questions. I don't see any. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to have answered by our panelists? And drop them in the
Larry, let me
chat
just
here.
I'll throw something out real quick
Yeah,
while you're looking for
please.
questions, while people
Yep.
are talking and formulating their ideas. The
Mhm.
difference between Palo Alto and Milwaukee, in the zip code I'm in right now, the property values are somewhere average between $35,000 to $50,000. A $50,000 house here is good. To take advantage of the tax breaks from doing private deconstruction, I'm pretty sure you need to reach a certain adjusted gross income and be able to write it off. If you can't write it off, deconstruction doesn't really mean anything to you. And that's something that we need to look at.
Yep.
If you're a city considering a deconstruction ordinance, this is going to sound harsh, but it's not really set up for a lower income community, because they won't be able to take advantage of the deconstruction tax benefits. And I'm not an accountant, and I could be backed up on that, I think, but you really have to, I don't want to segregate out a certain community that they can't take the benefits of deconstruction, but I'm going to force it on them. How do you do that as a city? That's something you really, really need to pay attention to before you jump into it.
Yeah,
Because
I would say, just a reminder, we are a for-profit, and we help both nonprofit and for-profit deconstruction companies. And of course, the for-profits, they don't offer any tax deduction and are equally successful and competitive, all the same. So the tax deduction is, there are alternatives to that. And one of the things that I would say, you know, I like what you were, you know, pointing out in that the tax deduction, you know, and how there could be communities that aren't as wealthy, and you'd wonder, like, how would they make this work? And a lot of times it comes down to, from our experience and our research, that it comes down to, there are different pots of money, and it might be about accessing different pots of money, like if it's workforce development money, or if it's environmental preservation, you know, money, or something like that, to maybe help subsidize deconstruction in those communities so that it still can work, but it's not all on the homeowner at that point. And so I think there are ways to make it work, but you're right. It's definitely more challenging if the you know, it's not about the property value, of course, because that's tax fraud, you know, that's happening in places like Palo Alto. But what it is about the material value that's coming out of that property, and then and of course it's a function of the total project cost. That's important too, you know. But I think that what we're trying to do in general is we're trying to make deconstruction about the same cost and take about the same amount of time as demolition, so that people aren't having to choose. They're not having to make a hard choice. That's our goal. That's why we're training people. That's why we're doing our research and development, to make this cheaper and faster, I guess.
Right. Hey, we do have two questions in here, and thanks, Dave, for that. Eric Serpas Ventura has one, and Melissa Wenzel also has one. I think we answered the one, or you answered the one, Dave, about that Melissa has, which is about what she calls your post-fab unbuilding. But Michael has a question, and either one of you can handle this one. It says, oh, excuse me. Eric has a question, and Michael, he's asked you, what are some of the things that have worked with builders and getting them to go ahead with deconstruction versus demolition? Michael.
From the private side, I think a lot of it has to do with the benefits, the tax benefits that go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's a statement. It's a statement piece that I could put on my project that I'm building, especially if I'm using all the maple floors that I can get out of these buildings. It's so nice to say, oh my gosh, I got all these maple floors from these houses, I'm putting them to reuse. One of the best things, though, to think about is that the story that goes along with the building, the people that take the building down, they're not just a workforce, they become part of the story of the material. And if you can do that, if you can grab that story and add it into your material, suddenly you got a value added to that material and you haven't really done physically anything to it. You're increasing the value of it just by telling the story, just by building up the wealth in the community, just by building up the strength and the resilience of that person and the community and the block and the neighborhood. You can see how it builds up into that a more community resilience kind of thing. And suddenly you're a developer that's adding resilience into the community and you're adding a nice product on the tax side. So there's a lot of wins that a developer can pick through, a lot of benchmark wins that they can find. It's just that it hasn't been phrased that way so much. Deconstruction hasn't been branded as a thing that can help you do that as a developer or a builder.
Okay.
You think about the workforce, all the good things you can do with the workforce and bringing people into the construction industry. You're not just creating laborers at this point. You're creating green construction workers, and that's a sustainable construction workforce. And that's something the community can brag about, bringing developers in. We have a set of workforce that's ready for you.
We're at the end of our time, gentlemen and audience. So let me wrap it up here, and thank you for that last answer there, Michael. And thanks to both of you. From our vantage point, our purpose with the Deconstruction Policy Accelerator is to help cities and counties create and implement well-crafted, effective policy for long-term solutions to this huge, huge problem of construction and demolition waste. We can't cover it all in one webinar. The tax issues have been handled in one of our earlier webinars, which is on YouTube. I'll be sending the link to this recording on YouTube after this is over in the next couple of days, and I've had the time to edit it and so forth. And then you can see the other ones if you want to go in and capture some of the information off of those. Our contact information is on the screen now. Let's see, we got a new website here for the DPA. And that just got started. And I just want to thank immensely. I want to thank Dave Bennink and Michael Olen for their time and their wisdom and their experience and sharing with all of us today. And that's a wrap. We're a minute late. Sorry for keeping you, but hey, see you next time. And thanks again, Dave and Michael and everybody here today. You're doing a good thing and we appreciate it. Waste is not waste until it is wasted. Thanks.